Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all are managing to have a wonderful day today. And the subject of today's video is probably something that we've seen within the news quite frequently throughout this year, especially in regards to the multitudes of riots that have spread not only across the United States but across the world as well. They're very highly responsible for damaging private property, assaulting police officers and innocent bystanders. Really, anyone that doesn't immediately, you know, bend the knee to their mob rule. And it is not BLM, but it is a very close related organization. And I know lately people have been making the claim that it's just an idea, not a group. But we're going to dissect that a little bit and decide for ourselves, shall we? And without further ado, we're going to be talking about Antifa. And I figured what a better way to do so than to talk about the group that initially started this entire thing. So we're going to go back to 1928 in Germany. All right, so to begin, I think it's important to note that the original Antifa, which I'm not even going to try to begin to pronounce the full title of the organization. Antifa is just an abbreviation, but it gets the point across. And it was founded from a party known as the Communist Party of Germany. And their goal was actually to overthrow the liberal democracy in place at the time in Germany and instead instill it with a government that was similar to that of the Soviet Union and enacted policies of Joseph Stalin. So, I think it's not much of a stretch to say that the group Antifa became intimately associated with the government of the Soviet Union and Joseph Stalin himself, especially when you understand that most of the funding for the group was actually coming from the heads of state in the Soviet Union. So, yeah, it's important to note. And the leader of Antifa, known as Ernst Thalmann, I don't fucking know. But yes, he was the leader of the organization, and obviously Hitler didn't take too kindly to having a rival political movement in his country. So when the National Socialists rose to power, he was arrested and placed in solitary isolation for upwards of 11 years. And then once Germany and the Soviet Union entered into the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, I think I pronounced that right, there was no attempt made by Joseph Stalin to have Ernst exonerated. So, get fucked Ernst first and foremost. But can you imagine that? Like, you go through all these troubles, all these trials to cultivate a political movement in your country, to overthrow the government. You have backing and aid coming from foreign allies, and then you don't get put in power. Instead, you get arrested, and the person that was assisting you in your initial efforts to cultivate this movement just kind of looks at you and says, "Get fucked." It's great. Ernst was subsequently executed on Hitler's orders, as well as many of his closest associates that had actually emigrated to the Soviet Union during the Great Purge of the 1930s. And I think it's just interesting to note that the epithet fascist or fascism, were utilized by the organization to describe things such as capitalism or the greater capitalist society, as well as any opinion or activity that could be deemed as anti-Stalinist or anti-Soviet. That sounds like a very interesting trend that we may be seeing today. More on that in a little bit. On top of that, they made the claim that social democracy was actually fascism as well, and an even more insidious variant than that of open fascism. It's kind of like, I would assume, the claim that if you are not overtly anti-racist, then you're just a closet racist, which makes you worse than an open racist. And they regarded fascism as the final stage of capitalism. So, it doesn't take too much to take the next logical step to assume that they're just anti-capitalists as well. This was the organization pre-World War II. They tried to rise to power. Unfortunately, I think fortunately, they were unable to do so. And the leader of the organization was killed. But there was still a lot of sympathizers within Germany and the surrounding areas. And they were still active even after World War II. Even in regards to continuing this protest, continuing this kind of by any means necessary to further their goals and whatnot. And we'll take a little bit of a look into that as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so post World War II, there were still many sympathizers within Germany, and specifically Berlin, who felt sympathetic towards the cause of Antifa and that kind of ideology that it encompassed, both on West and East Berlin. And it stayed that way all the way up until the Cold War. And during that time, like immediately post World War II, up to the Cold War, the individuals that were on the east side of Berlin were just largely assimilated by the new Stalinist movement and just kind of joined with the Soviet Union, whereas those on the west side just continued to do the whole kind of like marginalized political movement thing and protest. They were fervently against the Vietnam War as well as the United States' presence in the world itself, because they viewed the United States as a fascist entity. And left-leaning student movements kind of cultivated from this. I also think it's very interesting to note that these kind of ideologies were starting to gain more traction during the same time that things such as like critical race theory or I know it probably wasn't known at the time, but like intersectionality were introduced into the curriculum of university teachings. So I don't know if there's a correlation there or a causation. I just think it's interesting to take note of that. But the individuals that were sympathetic towards this cause in Berlin inspired others to take up arms in similar ways, but not exactly the same. Like the individuals that were inspired from these movements went on to start organizations such as the Maoist Communist League, as well as the Red Army faction, which are radicalized militant organizations aimed at furthering a very specific political goal, and that being communism. So yeah, it's just an interesting impact that they have both on the community that they are intimately in, as well as the wider community of the world, and how those individuals go on to act in the way of furthering this political ideology, which, I mean, it kind of goes along very similar lines as to the Antifa that we see within the United States today, which is actually what we're about to talk about. So yeah, let's just go ahead and delve into that as well. All right, so the modern iteration of Antifa as an organization has no real tangible grasp to the original group that was started back in Germany before World War II. However, they operate in very similar ways in terms of trying to further progress their ideology and achieve their goals essentially by any means necessary. Now, the Antifa that we see in the United States today, as well as across the world, I mean, let's just be fair here, we see it quite a bit in Europe as well, but in the United States, it's just a bunch of small contemporary groups, essentially individual cells of a larger organization that can act independently of the overarching narrative promulgated by the group as a whole. And they utilize social media in order to organize protests against things such as racism, fascism, intolerance, and authoritarianism. And so obviously the individuals that encompass these movements have those views and share those views. And they publicly state that the vast majority of their means of protest are peaceful, such as orchestrating speeches or posting flyers to garner support and awareness to issues they deem worthy. And they can make this claim. However, we have personally borne witness to some of their tactics in terms of protesting quite frequently this year, as we've seen an insane amount of riots spawn and spread across the entire nation. They obviously essentially burn cities down. Like, if you're not willing to actually bend the knee and coddle to these organizations, then you're a threat, and they will absolutely attack you. They do so by means of like doxing, public ridicule, public shaming, trying to ruin your career and get you fired from your job, as well as blacklisted from other organizations that may offer you a position similar to the one that you were in. So yeah, they can make the claim that they're peaceful, but their actions kind of speak a little bit louder on that one. They They attack law enforcement, innocent bystanders. They destroy public property, private property, and they just seem entirely unwilling to actually come to the battlefield of ideas and actually engage in a productive conversation about whether or not their ideas or positions are actually feasible in the world. So, it kind of it narrows the avenues that they can go down in terms of trying to further their goals if they're unwilling to do so peacefully, which, I mean, we've seen that they're kind of unwilling to do so peacefully. As much as they make the claim, I don't necessarily see it as a very true one. And Donald Trump, the president of the United States, in light of the recent actions being promulgated by Antifa and similar organizations, namely BLM. I know they're not the same group. They have innate ideological differences. That being, Antifa is more so anarcho-communist, and BLM, leaders of BLM have openly stated themselves to be trained Marxists. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference there. But they definitely find a common enemy in the United States and the power structure that is currently in place over our society. But Donald Trump has made the move to identify this organization as a domestic terrorist organization. And, I mean, I can justify why he would do that, even though they have quite frequently rebuked the claim that Donald Trump is making on them and saying that their protests are mostly peaceful, despite all the mounted evidence against that specific claim. So, yeah, it's a very interesting situation currently unfolding. It definitely seems like Antifa's playing into the narrative of, like, don't believe your lying eyes kind of thing, where, like, you're watching something unfold and then you're being told something completely different from the mainstream media or social organizations. And I would even go on a limb here and say that Antifa, as well as BLM, is largely the club that the individuals in power, the kind of establishment individuals within all aspects of our society, are utilizing in order to bludgeon any people that dissent against this overarching narrative. Because, like, if you don't bend the knee, then they will openly attack you. They will openly condemn you, try and ruin your livelihood. They will attack your business, destroy your business, and they won't face any repercussions, if we're being completely honest here. I mean, we've seen quite a few examples of Antifa members and BLM members both getting arrested at violent riots and then just immediately getting bailed out of jail through funds that are being donated to by massive media stars, movie stars, even politicians. They all donate to these bailout funds that are utilized in order to immediately spring Antifa and BLM members out of incarceration, even though them being there could entirely be justified and warranted. So it's just very interesting, and I just kind of wanted to shine more of a light on this organization in particular, because it is absolutely very influential, and I don't necessarily know if its level of influence is going to grow in society, but the level of influence it currently has is something that doesn't exactly sit very well with me as a free individual, a person that actually loves the opportunities provided by capitalism and freedom and liberty. So, yeah, I figured I'd just take a little bit of a look. If you guys like the video, feel free to let me know down in the comments and share it. And if you'd like to see more content similar to this, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell. So I'm sure we're all aware of the state of YouTube currently, so yeah, if you'd like to be alerted of when my next upload will be sure to hit that notification bell, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.